I'm going to be telling you blocks of stories for about 10 minutes. Some of them will seem a little self-indulgent because I'll bring myself to the storytelling, because my story matters in it. At the end of the 10-minute slots, your story matters too. I'm going to give us a chance to have a chat to your neighbour, have a chat to someone you've not spoken before. We'll have some time then to get some feedback, because stories really matter. One of my greatest frustrations in social care was you would have an A4 lever arch folder, absolutely jam-packed, and only 2 pages of that would be dedicated to the story of the person. The rest of it is all about their body. Does that feel fair? Does that feel just? So I want to make sure that I'm not going to be speaking for the whole all the way up to 1 o'clock. I do want to make sure we all have space, and there's been a few people that have shown me stuff or talked about stuff that will absolutely apply to the stories I'm telling. So do make sure you're sitting comfortably. If you want to go and grab a cup of tea, I'll only be telling another lovely little story, and it kind of matters, but it also kind of doesn't matter. I'm not going to tell you what the interpretation is. I might feed a little bit in, and while on the one hand, it's not academic, on the other hand, it's absolutely relying on you as human beings with all of the potential to find your own meaning. So you might, and one story might apply to you more than the other, but all of it will lead back to why words matter. So sit comfortably, look after your spine, suck in your core, and occasionally do your pelvic floor. When you think, oh, she's going on, you know, I'll see on your faces which one you're doing. In the beginning, before the heavens and the earths existed, lived a god and goddess. Apsu, the god of fresh water, and Tiamat, the goddess of salt water. Before meadowlands or reed beds had been formed, when there were no other deities, no destinies had yet been decreed, these two mingled their waters, and from those waters came younger gods. These younger gods grew in strength and stature and became wise and mighty. Unfortunately, as well as being strong and mighty, the young gods also became unruly and troublesome. In true fashion, as young men, they banded together as brothers and ran amok amongst the gods, dancing and partying loudly. They did this so much they upset Tiamat's nerves, disturbed Apsu's sleep, and stopped his daytime rest. Apsu decided enough was enough, and he plotted to destroy the younger gods in order to get his peace back. However, one of them, A, heard about the plot and, putting Apsu into a deep sleep, killed him and created his own dwelling place out of Apsu's body. Tiamat was furious about what he had done, and she gathered around her a different set of gods and created demons, including the Hydra, the Scorpion Man, and the Hairy Hero, in order to bring down A and his brothers. One particular son was called Marduk, the god of all gods, so amazing and wondrous that he could scarce be looked at. With her new husband, Kingu, Tiamat ruled and introduced a reign of terror and chaos. When her A heard of Tiamat's fury and desire for revenge, and about the hideous army she had drawn about her and a rule of chaos, he sent various of the gods to try and appease her, but none of them had the courage even to approach her. The gods met to discuss what could be done, and finally, Marduk agreed that he would fight her on condition they appointed him king. This they did. And so Marduk set out and in a mighty battle captured Tiamat, the demon, and her divine allies. Having slain the gods and tied the demons to his feet, he went back to Tiamat and killed her too, in a manner far too gruesome for Methodist women in Britain. However, I'll give you some detail. Marduk sliced Tiamat's dead body in two and formed the heavens from half of her and the earth from the other. He created the Euphrates and Tigris rivers to flow from her eyes, and from her breasts created the mountains. Then, from the blood of the defeated and slain Kingu, created humankind to serve the gods and set the gods free from having to do any work. And thus, the world was created and its habitants were created. That sucks, doesn't it? This was the creation story in Babylon, where the Jews were held, enslaved in Mesopotamia. And right in the middle of it is an oral tradition that the Jews counterbalanced that story with. And we're going to come to their story in the next bit. If you want to explore why that creation story is so important for environmental justice, because I'm not going to talk about it today, there's a book called, get your pens out, a book called Say Yes to Life. It's by Ruth Valerio, and it was the Archbishop of Canterbury's Lent book a couple of years ago, and it's really, really good. It breaks down that story, that's almost exactly as it's written, but then looks at why our creation story is so important for how we engage with the planet. Our stories matter. I had just finished my master's degree. Oh, come back. Oh. There we go. That's not me. I had just finished my master's degree, so naturally I found a minimum wage job to the delight of my parents. My first day working in a care home, I was told to go and get Pamela up and ready for breakfast. Don't worry when she screams, they said. She always screams, so just get it done quickly. So in I went to see screaming Pamela. In the bedroom were 2 single beds, and in the first, I was a little surprised to find, were 5 babies, all tucked into bed, some of them with crusty food still inside their mouth, eyes all closed as if they were sleeping. In the other bed was Pamela, a tiny little lady curled up on her side. So I tiptoed around the bed to go and find the bathroom to help her with her personal care. In it was a sink and a loo, which was unusual. It was the only room in the whole building that only had a sink and a loo. The rest of them were all proper en suites. And I turned the tap on to get the water warm and then went to find the towels. And I waited. It was an old, repurposed hotel, so of course hot water would take some time to come. And I waited some more. And no water that was warm came to that tiny lady's bedroom. What does that tell you about the screaming? So indignant Becca tiptoed until she got out of the room to find a bowl of warm water. And I went in and I gently woke up this elderly lady who was really pleased to see me. And I took her into the bathroom and I washed her feet and I dried her feet and I put on the fluffiest socks. And then I washed her legs and I dried her legs and we put on some leggings. And we did the same all the way up until this lady who had been with the tiredness and frailty bent over was standing up quite tall and had not screamed once. And she looked at me and she said, "Your teeth are lovely." I said, "Yes. My mother says I must clean my teeth in the morning and the evening. I bet your mother says the same too." And without any prompting from me or any assistance, Pamela, for the first time in I don't know how long, but the oral hygiene was not strong in that room, cleaned her own teeth and then walked to the dining room with very little assistance by this point. Absolutely delighted. And from then on, Pamela, with quite advanced dementia, would always make a beeline for the stranger who she didn't know and could never name who I was or why I was there. And she would come up to me and she would pat my face and she would say, "You're a good soul." She didn't have any short-term memory. She had no idea who I was, but her heart really remembered. I changed the story of what screaming Pamela was about. I challenged it by being curious, by not accepting their words, and by finding another way. I found a woman who absolutely loved babies, Those dolls were not dolls, they were babies, and we treated them accordingly. She would make sure that we danced and we looked after them, and she would not eat until she felt they had been looked after first. She was not screaming Pamela, she was a deeply compassionate, loving woman. After 2 years of working for All We Can, last month I had the privilege to go to Uganda. I was overly excited. If I come across as a Labrador puppy, I often am. Uganda is a lush, green country with abundance of water that tumbles into the source of the Nile before it flows into Egypt and pincers with the source of the other bit of the Nile from Sudan. Did you know that the name, the source of the Nile started in Uganda when European adventurers went in and they asked local people, what is this river called? And they gave a sentence that ended Nile. Later translated, we do not understand what you are saying. It's also a country with a large percentage of its population living below the poverty line, where access to education, healthcare, government support is limited, and the people most vulnerable to that are children, women, and people living with disabilities. And that limits and puts obstacles in the way of their huge potential. We met a group, and I was instantly nicknamed. I'd never met so much energy that matched mine in a room, and they nicknamed me Buntu, which just means people, because Becca loves people. And they have set up what they're calling a beekeepers association. Do I have a picture for this? You think that would be a picture? There we go, there's Patrick. A beekeepers association, and it gathers together groups of people interested in beekeeping. Beekeeping is a low energy job. You can set up a hive with the support of Buba, and it's then non-labour intensive versus other agricultural practices, which is great for value-added income. Now, our host and chair of the group, this is Patrick. When he was a child, he had a botched malaria vaccine, so that Patrick walks around on his hands and feet. He has flip-flops on his hands, shoes on his feet, because his body just did not develop because of this vaccine that he received, and that is not unfamiliar throughout that bit of Uganda. And yet I have never met a more upright man. He introduced to us and modelled in EDI in a way no online training course could ever do. Because he sat there and he introduced every single person and named their disability in this group of gathered people with different disabilities. He taught us how to speak and modelled it with such deep grace that you stopped seeing the disability immediately and saw the people that he was interacting and engaging us with. I cannot fully describe what it felt like in the whole group when one person received the honey that Buba had processed from their bees. They got these little canisters. There were about 8 canisters from a beehive. They'd been processed before us the night before, and we'd watched the honey, and we've got some beautiful slow-motion video clips of honey undulating out of the tank. And then before this group, this one man received, and the whole group celebrated in his harvest. With the incredible help of the team at Bupa, who provide equipment for beekeeping and training, and then process the honey, so they will process it and sell it, and they'll give the market value to the farmer. They're changing the narrative of what it is to be someone living with a disability in Uganda. Better yet, Joseph, who's just a delicious human being. I don't know how else to describe him. He has this beautiful dream, because if in the area of Bukadi, it used to be an ancient forest, but with development, houses being built, wood needing to be burnt in order to cook your food, the trees aren't there anymore. But for every beehive, you must plant a tree. because the bees won't live without a tree. So he has this vision not just of enabling people to increase their household income, but doing something more and greater, that slowly this ancient forest will be restored because of individuals planting trees. Words have the power to lift us up or hold us down, to create an environment in which we live, for good or bad, to give dignity and respect, or to dishonour the person we're talking about. Words can set the bar high of our expectation about how we treat someone and the way we see the world in which we live. From suffering and demented or senile to living with dementia. From natural resources to be squandered and exploited to a living ecosystem on which we are all dependent. From attention-seeking or difficult to having additional needs. I've heard people living with dementia described as badly behaved, naughty, or unable. It makes me mad. And then creative and inventive, and to do lots of wonderful things. There are words that we've used to talk about people who don't have money, vulnerable, hopeless, desperate, uneducated, or when some in the media have talked about refugees, a plague, a swarm, an infiltration, used to make us feel something, and often something negative, to prey on our fear of what is going on, the unsettledness of our times, and make the people already vulnerable to homelessness, to poverty, the ones to blame rather than the ones to help. The inconvenient screamers, at best a nuisance, a chore that we need to get rid of quickly, at worst a threat to our peace and security. The power of our words. Words have the power to paint a picture because of how they've been used before. I went to see a doctor about an MRI this week. I said I'd share my story. There's a lump in my head, pressing against my optic nerve, making my vision fuzzy. Specsavers were decidedly unhelpful. Have you had that moment where you're waiting for a result? That feeling. And what the doctor is going to say next is absolutely going to impact how you feel, what you're hoping for. He said it's very unlikely that it's anything sinister, a lurking, praying, threatening word that speaks of monsters in the cupboard and criminals loitering on shadowy street corners. So I'm glad it's unlikely. At worst are the words that are very closest to ourselves, the words that echo in our heads, maybe words we've picked up, maybe words other people have said to us. Have you ever said, I am something? I am so stupid. I am so fat, old, ugly. I am lazy. I am worthless. I am past it. Those words that linger and chip away at our confidence and who we are and our perceived value. Those words curled around me when I was in the very depths of depression, knocking out any spark of hope that dared to flare up. The I am of it that defines me, that becomes the truth and measure of my worth, and giving body and realness with the weight of the words. This is the painfulest bit. There's other stories that are painful, but this is the one where I'm really inviting you to name those words and to have a chat with the people beside you. People have already come up to me and talked about the words that press in, that start to define, that start to limit. Can you imagine if Pamela has started to call herself the screamer? What that had defined her, how she felt when she left her bedroom, to know that was how she was being described. We'll all have those deep in the darkest corners. And we're just going to sit with that discomfort. I know Jenny said she was going to make us uncomfortable. I'm going to make you go personal and do pelvic floor simultaneously. So meaningful eye contact, that's the really important bit. So what I want you to do is turn to the people next to you and be brave. Name the words that have been hurt. I used to say to the children, if you name something and look it in the eye, you have already taken out most of its power. You've already said, it's not there lurking in the background, chipping away when you're most vulnerable. What you've done is bring it right to the surface and you say, not in my head. So what I want you to do is try and name it. What are the words that you might say to yourself? It might be, I am too tired. And there will be truth in that. But it's also not an I am. We're not defined by our body's limitations. So please be a little uncomfortable. We are women together. There is magic in when women sit and talk to each other. Because someone might be able to turn to you and say, yes, me too, or I hear you. That flipping hurts. So be compassionate. Listen to each other. I'm going to give you 5 minutes, depends on the sound of the room. And then if you're brave, tell us. Tell us in this big safe space of womenness and share your story, because there'll be someone else in the room that says me too. The number of bosom hugs I had after yesterday are people saying either me too or yes, I see your pain. It's healing. So let's heal together. Lance the boil. Does anyone have any questions about what I'm asking you to do? I love naming names that I can't remember. We flew into Intabi. We then drove to the bit right by the source of the Nile. Anyone? It was Ginger. Thank you, Vic. This is why I love you so much. Ginger, put your hand up. Thank you. It was Ginger. We stayed in Ginger, which is right on Lake Victoria. So it's right in the bottom bit of Uganda. Uganda's huge, and we stayed kind of across the bottom and then went up that way. We were in the Cedar district where the beekeepers are, and that was the furthest that we went up. We did not go and see the gorillas, much to my despair, but we did sit literally on top of the springs that are the source of the Nile, and that's just the rage in that water. It's just so much. Is that helpful? That was a semi-impressive feat of Becca remembering names. So 5 minutes. Name the words that knock you down and take some of the power out of them. Try and be honest and open. It is uncomfortable and painful. Chaplain, can you just give us a wave? I recognise for some people this stirs up the muddy bottom of your pond that is you. And if it becomes a bubbling wave that you need to talk to something about, please do go and see the chaplain, because that is exactly why she is here. Thank you. Right, about 5 minutes. Might be a bit longer depending on how chattery you are. Off we go. I see you, girl guides. I see where you are. I see you in the room. Vic and Jenny are going to wander around. We are recording, and it'll go on YouTube. If you do not want to share a story on the internet, which is absolutely fine, just give a wave, like... I'm making it up on the spot, can you tell? Not even choreographed. Yeah, if you could just indicate to Matt at the back, you're happy to share in this private space, but you don't want it to go on the internet, that's all it'll take. And it'll be cut out afterwards. You will not feature on what goes on YouTube, okay? So please feel safe to share in this group. It's a confidential space unless you don't do that. And then it will go on YouTube. Did I just confuse myself? Not going on YouTube. Okay. So what came up? You had a great chat. You talked about stuff. What has bubbled to the surface for you? Who's going to be brave?
Use of language.
Here we go. And one at the back, Jenny.
Just going to say the use of a word. Last week, I was told that care companies refer to people who they, in inverted commas, care for as units.
They're going to have a raging Methodist Women in Britain army on their cases. Can I say my story about Pamela was not MHA. It was a completely different care home. Just to be very clear, I never saw anything like that in MHA. Thank you. Yes, please.
I'm going to use the word assumption.
Okay.
If the definition of assume is make an ass out of you and me.
Yes.
I'm a minister's wife, and people have expectations of ministers' wives, what they cannot do, how they dress, and that's so wrong. That had put me down, and I actually walked away from my church for about 5 weeks. It took courage to go back, because some people saw me outside of church and said, "Are you coming back?" And I eventually did. So don't assume.
Assumptions. Thank you.
Sort of following on from that, as another minister's wife, thank you, Stephanie. You were saying about not saying I am as being a way of defining who you are. And I think my experience has been that I've wanted to say I am, because I spent my entire life sort of being an appendage to somebody else, being defined by other people, and particularly as a minister's wife. When I expected a desire to do a particular ministry, and the first comment I got back was, "You'll be such an asset to your husband," that I never again exercised that particular ministry. And I wanted to say, but I am me.
More. Thank you. Thank you. Wow, we can take a round of applause. Yes, please.
Oh. My father always called me a quitter. I never stuck at anything. I'd try my hand, but I'd give up if I didn't like it. And I've had to give up lots of things because I live with fibromyalgia. So I'm always thinking, I don't start something new because I'm going to have to give it up.
Yeah.
And I went to see the psychologist with the pain clinic, and she got me to write down all the things I've achieved with fibromyalgia. I went, oh my goodness. And so, yes, I'm not a quitter.
Amen.
I try new things. I'm a goer.
Yes, you are. Hello, thank you. I'm liking this. For the people that didn't get an applaud, can we just give those an applause? Because we're developing our own language of appreciation that as it develops, some people got missed out. Vic, hello.
Following on from a minister's wife, that's me as well. And very often, ministers, yeah, that's right. Very often they would say, I expect Brian's told you.
Yes.
Things that he shouldn't tell me, and he never ever shared anything with me.
Yes.
But also, I do a lot of voluntary work at Rochester Cathedral, and we were there for a concert the other evening, and talking to a couple in the audience, and he said, "You're lucky, you get to see this for free." And I said, "I'm not, because I give up my time to do this."
Yes.
And that hurts a bit. Yeah, because they don't. And I think a lot of people think because I've done the bookings for this weekend, perhaps I get paid for it, but I don't. I'm a volunteer. Yeah, well, we do, yes, but we're all volunteers who've organised this weekend.
One there and then one there. Thank you.
This is a message from Irene on Zoom.
Hi, Irene on Zoom.
to continue. It means so much when we have good friends and Christ's abiding love for me that keeps reminding me that Christ loves me for me. I have had to discover strategies to prioritise what is okay for me at 81 years of age and what is all right to let go.
Yes.
It is a very real, ongoing journey.
Yes, and that is wisdom. Thank you, Irene.
I'd like to invite people to join me in a one-woman campaign against the word illegitimate. I am not legitimate.
Yes.
You can call me a bastard, though probably not to my face. But I really dislike the implication that some people are legal or
Yes.
above board or proper,
Yeah.
and that some people aren't. Moreover, in the current world, I don't think you'd find many children these days, actually, to whom that derogatory term would not apply.
Yes.
So please join my one-woman campaign to outlaw the word illegitimate. Thank you.
Thank you. And you can see there's so much work we do. I'm a trainer for mental health first aid. And one of the things that we really do around stigma is the words that cement things in reality. When we say someone has committed suicide, the only other time we say committed is committed a felony, committed a bank robbery. What does that say about suicide? So just noticing the words that just knock us down. It stigmatizes something that is so fragile, so painful. Two more?
About this.
Please get emotional. That's what we're here for, my love.
Is it working all right? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. The love of my life and I are separated by miles. I haven't seen him for many years, and for very good reasons we cannot be together. We have a son who's now 30. I live, my son obviously moved out, and I'm on my own again.
Yeah.
Quite recently, somebody in church came by and said to me, well, it's all right for you. You live on your own.
Yeah.
In fact, that's the last thing I want to do.
Thank you. It feels strange clapping, but that's piling on for a hug right now would be really weird and damaging, but the clap is, we love you, we see you.
I found it difficult, but I think now can cope with it. Because when I first came to this country 21 years ago, I came from back home as a local preacher in the church. And I came with my letter of transfer from a minister, and I gave it to my local minister where I attended. I'm not going to mention the church.
Thank you.
And he was good. They welcomed me. They put me on the preaching plan. And each time I took a preaching plan in the church, there was this man who used to stand by the door and wanted to correct me in terms of, oh, your accent, your volume isn't good. And it was preaching plan after preaching plan until one day I thought, okay, I'm going to answer this man. And he did the same. He would stand outside, greet you, talk, start correcting you what he thought you have not done well. So I said to him, oh, thank you so much. If you are really this good, why aren't you a local preacher?
Thank you. So we do sit in this place of pain. We've been hurt. I don't think it's whinging, it's naming. Jenny, we have one more, and I don't want to ignore that. Oh, 2 more. You know what? This is our space.
I just want to continue the conversation of the last speaker and Barbara's, who is asking us to join other women fight against being stigmatized because of their background. I find it very offensive when people judge me without knowing my story and having worked my journey. I have been in England for over 20 years, and I'm still waiting to be allowed to contribute, but then people judge me and many others without knowing our stories. And that happens even in the church.
Sometimes it's the non-words that can hurt even more. For instance, you may be in a group within your church wanting to enjoy conversation, and the body language keeps you out. So sometimes it's not just words. We forget a lot of times that body language also plays that important role. You know, I'm not having conversation with you, but it's not being said. And what I would urge us to do is to try to be a bit more understanding, especially when we're within our groups, to also have the ability to open the groups a bit more and let others in. It's the only way we can grow. And especially as women, we've all got such stories. I can tell you 100 stories today.
Yes.
And it's nice to be able to share it, not just in our group, the ones we like and the cozy ones, but also be prepared to be challenged. We can agree to disagree. Yes. We can disagree to agree. Thank you.
Thank you. That felt really important. It feels important, you know, when you've got a splinter and it's sitting there and it's tiny, but you know it's there. So if that has brought up things for you, please do have a chat with the chaplain. I'm a mental health first aider. Is anyone else a trained mental health first aider in the room? There are 2 at the back. Do have a chat. I'll have a chat afterwards. Don't let that go. Don't let the splinter fester. Sometimes we can get it out and then we can heal, and that would be amazing. Okay, have a wiggle. We're going to go into our next story. Oh, hang on, wrong thing. In the beginning, God created the heavens and earth. All you see, all you don't see. Earth was a soup of nothingness, a bottomless emptiness, an inky blackness. God's spirit brooded like a bird over the watery abyss. God spoke, light, and light appeared. God saw that the light was good and separated light from dark. God named the light day. He named the dark night. It was evening. It was morning. Day 1. Fast forward 6 days because we don't have that much time. God spoke. Earth, generate life, every sort of life, cattle and reptiles, wild animals, all the kinds. And there it was, wild animal of every kind, cattle of all the kinds, every sort of reptile and bug. God saw that it was good. God spoke. Let us make human beings in our image, make them reflecting our nature, so they can be responsible for the fish in the sea, the birds in the air, the cattle, and yes, earth itself, and every animal that moves on the face of earth. God created human beings. He created them God-like, reflecting God's nature. He created them male and female. God blessed them, prosper, reproduce, fill the earth, take charge, be responsible for the fish in the sea, the birds in the air, for every living thing that moves on the face of the earth. Then God said, I've given you every sort of seed-bearing plant on earth and every kind of fruit-bearing tree, given them to you for food. To all the animals and all the birds, everything that moves and breathes, I give whatever grows out of the ground for food. And there it was. God looked over everything he had made. It was so good, so very good. It was evening, it was morning, day 6. Can you imagine an enslaved group of people surrounded by that original narrative of God tearing bodies apart and making breasts into mountains? And in the middle of that, they are whispering the creation story of something different. Not human beings created to be the slaves of the gods so they didn't need to do work, but human beings where the bar is set that we are godlike. Can you imagine the strength of that whispered story of holding people to a different way of thinking? They could have succumbed to it. They may have succumbed to it. There's lots of periods in the Old Testament where we do not hear the story of the Jews. Right after Joseph and his 11 brothers and one sister called Dinah, who's forgotten all the time. Right after that story, do you know how many years it is? It's about 500 years. It's a heck of a lot of story, isn't it? Right at the end of the Old Testament, before Jesus turns up and John's walking around eating all the honey. Is that Winnie the Pooh? I'm mixing the stories. But in that gap, it's about 500 years. That's 1,000 years we're missing from the story. They may have succumbed at times to the different narratives about their place and purpose. And yet that story stood firm and brought them and elevated them to hoping for something more. Prophetic people within a community who told of a God whose spirit first hovered over that pregnant water, soupy, full of potential. It's funny what happens when story shapes us. One of the many places I've lived in the UK was England, not England. I've lived in England for all of my life, except for 6 months in Zimbabwe. I used to live in Stevenage, and for those that have ever been on a geography field trip to look at the planning of new towns, God bless you, Stevenage was the first new town built after the war. So many people who lost their houses during the Blitz were relocated to Stevenage. And in the census, Stevenage was identified to have the highest number of atheists in the United Kingdom. People who for generations had had the ties with baptisms, funerals and weddings with the local parish church severed and didn't pick it up with the new concrete church, which wasn't as pretty, in Stevenage. And with the ties cut, they did not auto-write down Church of England, which is what quite a lot of non-believers still do today. So it wasn't default. And instead, they just said, I don't believe in God. I'm not Church of England, because that was generations ago. I don't believe. There was a local charity that was concerned, not because of their lack of faith, but because people in Stevenage seemed to be unusually unhappy as a community. And there seemed to be lower levels of self-confidence and pride in the area they lived, and higher levels of depression. The greatest claim to fame is Lewis Hamilton, and he got out of Stevenage so fast that he's won a record 7 Formula Ones. And it's often the case with social unease there was a higher representation of, I think, every right-wing political group. It was thought that with the absence of story to hold on to, that people, to make sense of people's life experience, develop an emotional language to say who I am, what I need, how I identify, that traditionally had actually been part of the liturgical life of the local church, of Christmas and Easter and funerals and weddings, that people lacked a firm sense of belonging and cultural identity. And so instead of, in that place of dis-ease, instead of saying this is who we are, defined by the stories that made them and shaped them, they started to say this is who does not belong. This is who isn't. I can say quickly who isn't like me, who isn't of me, to define where they ended and the other began. These are the groups of people that are causing the problem. They're the nuisance, the plague in our area. So if believing that shared story is essential for belonging and self-understanding, the charity started going into local schools to share fun, interactive Bible stories, not to proselytize, not to cause or create a sense of faith, but in order to better understand our emotions. So they'd use something like Jonah and the whale and tell the story and say, have you ever wanted to run away from something because you were scared? What does that feel like? What do you think Jonah was feeling? What do you think it felt like when he was sitting in the belly of a whale? Can you imagine? I'd imagine it was quite fishy and smelly. But to give that language, shared language really matters, because it isn't just about how we communicate, but it's how we feel about ourselves and the places where we belong. I want to tell you a story about a girl I met in Uganda, and it is a horrible story. And I want you to care about her, because without your support, the charity supporting her wouldn't have any funds. And so her story would become just another statistic. And the temptation would be to really overemphasize the bad, so you feel how urgent it is, so you pity her. And before I go on, this is Zahara. She gave us permission to use her photograph, and we are very, very clear how we will use someone's photograph. Her mother was there. She also gave consent, as were the charity that work with her. It was all done in Zahara's language, so she understood. This isn't uncarefully used, because I'm wary about using a picture of an underage girl to talk about her story, but it's with her permission, understanding how important awareness is, and she wants you to know. So there is that temptation to overemphasize, because I could have picked the other picture where she is not looking as happy. I could pick a picture that develops pity and sympathy, and that's not the story I want you to go away with. The urgency is hope, not despair. I'm going to keep her butt. Zahara was violated and became pregnant at 14, and I have a 14-year-old daughter, and it really upsets me. This was the day that I sobbed. And she's looked after and she's safe, relatively speaking. But she doesn't yet have enough money to go back to school. And she does desperately need intervention, and therefore your money, because without it, her potential as the good student she had been is lost. She could just be another powerless victim, lost in the statistics of Uganda's poverty rates, used as a warning and a plea for funds. I could do that. I've sort of done that, but that's not what I want you to remember. This little girl is more than a single teenage mother living in isolation. She's a survivor. You can see that. She was so proud to have her photo taken. Zahara came to the attention of COFCAWE, which stands for Concern for Child and Women's Empowerment. Am I right, roughly? No, that sounds about right, doesn't it? Through a pilot they're running in the local community. By listening, by being embedded, by being there, they've recognised that women and children are more often impacted by poverty and all of the complicated, messy painfulness of that because of cultural attitudes about their rights and their place and their worth. And they wanted to challenge that through education. And as an outside organisation, wildly inappropriate for us to do that, Cofcarway even recognise it's not appropriate for them. They don't live in that village. It's not their people. So what they're piloting is a safeguarding committee who wear T-shirts like this. And when they first went into the communities, people were furious. You want to change our way of life? You want to ruin our fun? You want to change how we are behaving? And now slowly, bit by bit, the culture is changing and the community is starting to report things. They're giving information about what a child needs to thrive, what children need to flourish, what they need for nutrition, what they need in terms of school, what they need in terms of hygiene. They're doing the talking, explaining in areas in a language that is understood. It was the safeguarding committee that arrested the man and took him to the police. A few years ago, that would not have been possible. The community would have protected him. He was one of ours. You don't take him to an outside force like the police. But they've changed it. They've arrested him. It's going through courts. So Sahara is more than a little girl on her own with a baby. She's a girl living with her mother, surrounded by neighbours who are asking her every day, when are you going back to school? They're changing the views and the culture of the people, and they're a visible presence. In the other safeguarding committee, I was very jealous of it. They've got Wellington boots with Cofcarway and All We Can on. And now I have a cap that has Fabio on, which is First African Bike Association, but they had Wellington boots. Just this visible presence that took a baby and made sure that he lived where his sibling had died, and took a little girl and they've adopted her because there was no one else. Just a small group of people making a huge difference. They've also got the Cofcarway team themselves advocating for her in court, representing her, holding the man to account for his actions. He's not done it. This isn't the first time he's done it, but it's going to be the last time. And there was a magical moment, and forgive me for those that object to the word magical. Sometimes I don't know as a 5-year-old how to describe something that I can't describe, and it was a spiritual moment under the shade of this tree when Sahara's mother in yellow, MWiB in the white and the red flowers, sat together in a circle with Sahara and Sarah and Maria. Now, MWiB has rubbed shoulders with Desmond Tutu. She's from Uganda, lives in Uganda, but she's an employee of All We Can, because I don't speak the many languages of Uganda, but MWiB speaks some of them okay, some of them really well, and then acts as an in-between because she knows far better than we do. And then Cofcarway know even better. And then Zahara's mom knows even better. She's surrounded by these people sitting and talking. And it isn't a money moment. I mean, it's Sarah and Maria. Sarah is the head of Cofcarway in, is that blue? Grey? Maria's in red. Their salary comes from All We Can. But this isn't a grant moment. This is women sitting together under the shade of the tree, listening to the painful stories and how difficult it's been. And then they started coaching Sahara and her mum, reminding them where they had been and what they have achieved. You know, that moment with the nurse of all you've achieved with fibromyalgia. Incredible moments, but it just took presence for them to do that. They weren't offering to fix the problems. They were reminding the mother how good her farming had been and how much she's already managed to save and pay for, that it is possible to do that. With the neighbours raising the bar, not just, oh, your life's over now that you've got a baby, but when are you going back to school? Holding that expectation, that hope for her future, reminding her that she is more than what's happened to her, to survive and to thrive and to flourish. It's soft and it is really immeasurable. The data people would find it hard to show on a graph what that felt like. But that felt like the most important moment. It wasn't look at what they're doing in court. It was look how they are present and listening. There are not quick fixes in these complicated stories. Education alone isn't going to solve the problems that that little girl faces. Investing in that ongoing relationship so that Maria is just another magical human being who goes in and you know that she has spent time in that community when they flock around her. It's like learning to make reusable pads. It's not a direct educational outcome, but it means that girls aren't missing 1 week a month from their education to avoid the humiliation of bleeding in school. Now, I vaguely remember that fear when you get up out of your chair and do the quick look to make sure. But if you can't afford the disposable pads, now you can make your own. Not only that, but they're starting to sell it and trademark it. A little social enterprise where Kafkawe are then going to make more money with social income. So they are eventually independent, and they don't need us anymore. But for now they do, so please give us your money. Just to be very clear. Words have the ability to hold us up and lift us up, just like that creation story was able to break through what the Jews believed about their purpose in life and what we need to grow towards. If our potential is God, it's a high bar, isn't it? But that's our potential. Our blueprint, our spiritual DNA. It gives us somewhere to grow into, somewhere we can measure against and hope towards. I need you to understand the urgency that our partners do. And I could do that by emphasizing the lack of freedom and choice and security that people face. That's all very real. The statistics are there. If that's the message you want, I could do that sort of delivery. It would portray the heartbreaking pain and how important it is to act and give. But what if we acted and gave from a place of hope rather than despair and panic? Would we sit and listen for longer? Would it stay our knee-jerk reaction of going, well, what she needs must be education? What if it is the under the shadow of the tree first? And people like Sarah and Maria at Kafkawe. It was the only day I sobbed, and I did it silently at the back of the van instead of in front of all of these people. There is an uphillness when it comes to, okay, here is one obstacle in the life of this little girl. Here's another one. Here's another one. But isn't that also the same for anyone reaching their potential? There's so much more yet of her story to come, but what is sinister is when our words start to imply that people experiencing malnutrition or homelessness or unjust treatment is that they are powerless or voiceless, or that with our comparative wealth and privilege, we must be the ones to offer intervention or be the ones that prioritizes what needs to be done next. We want to offer that different story, to have safe pads, to have the continued support of Maria, because they all have so much potential right up there. And we can be part of supporting and enabling that, following their lead, sitting under the shadow of their tree in their story. So we're going to have a few more minutes together. And this is hopefully going to have a slightly different tone and energy. But who has lifted you up? What words have lifted you up? Imagine that person. We've all got, it was an Auntie Johnson for me. She lived next door. And for some reason, she always thought I liked the heart of an iceberg lettuce when I went round to collect JMA. She also gave me the bone for the dog. He got one thing, and I got the other thing. And I still love chewing bones to this day. So what I'd like you to do, turn to a different person, turn to the same group, whatever you like to do. A bone is an activity, it is not a snack. I'd love you to have a chat. What words have you lifted you up? What words have changed your trajectory? What stories have shaped who you are? That's where we're going now. This is holding on to the Auntie Johnsons, however misguided they might have been, but she always gave me £1 for the JMA box. About 5 minutes, and then we're going to come back. All this bit together, just finishing your sentences or your stories. Nearly there. There's something really beautiful about the slow sinking of that sound. I'm trying to work out with this. Is this a pencil case? It's a multi-purpose bag. Take pride in how far you have come and have faith in how far you have to go. Well, that's going in my pocket. It fits. Does anyone want to share? Glamorous assistants. Who shouted Becca just then?
I did. To say
Hello.
It's got coloured cards in it, coloured emotion cards.
Yes.
And it's got a fidget in it, and it's got, all sorts of things like that.
Put your hand up if you want to play with that bag later. If you could find this young lady. Yes, please. Who wants to share their story? Jenny at the back.
This is from Liz on Zoom. Liz
Hi, Liz.
Marriott, well known to many people. This is what she says. What gave me a boost at our World Day of Prayer service this year? I had read the part of one of the leaders reading in German. The minister's wife said to me afterwards, I admire you for doing that.
Thank you. Thank you. Got a little gaggle at the back. How do you feel about being called a gaggle? Do we like gaggle? So, sometimes it fits, sometimes it feels, oh.
I like the word knowledge, and it's taken from 2 Peter chapter 1, verse 3. His divine power has given us everything we need for a godly life through our knowledge of him who called us by his own glory and goodness. And I use my gift from God in art to create words of inspiration.
Can we show that to the ladies on Zoom, and then we'll hold it up at the front? That's it. Can you see ladies on Zoom? We got some thumbs up. Is it close enough? Yeah. And we'll just have a look at it at the front while someone else. Oh, God. Having a clear lectern is just very silly. Have the big one in this one. Okay, hang on. You carry on. Come down to the front. Hello.
Thank you. I just want to share, it's when someone believes in you, when you want to do something and they back you.
Yes.
That's been one of the biggest things.
Yes.
But a lot of the stuff I carry from childhood. Of being told you weren't good enough or you're not going to manage it. And you keep that. If 100 people, 99 said I did something good and one said not, I know I'll dwell on the not.
Yeah.
And it's changing the mindset that needs to change.
Yes. And that's a huge thing. Therefore, do not conform to the patterns of this world, but be by the renewing of your mind. That is what the gospel is supposed to do. It's supposed to liberate us from those childhood, just the single tiny splinters of pain that we allow to define us. Why are we doing it? Could we change it? Can we change the narrative? Oh, hallelujah, ladies. Amen. I've got a hand up there and a microphone there. Thank you very much.
Hello, my name's Jan, and Mary has given me permission to tell you a little bit about her story because she said her English isn't good enough. But Mary grew up in India. Where?
In Hyderabad.
And she could relate to the last story because Mary had an arranged marriage at 14. But equally, Mary was pleased to see the story and listen to the story today because things have changed. It was very different for her then. So we give thanks that Mary's now here and that she's with us this weekend.
Thank you. I went to Synod and shared a story about people who in Malawi when the floods had swept through and dumped 2 meters of sand on otherwise fertile topsoil. And it was, I choke up, as you can tell, because it matters to me and I'm passionate about it. And I felt embarrassed that I had in front of Synod and all those, not just beautiful women, but all sorts of different men there as well, who sometimes have told me that I'm over-emotional. And I got to the end of it feeling a bit exhausted and over lunch had a conversation with the 2 women that followed. One of them was from Bangladesh and her family were all being swept through and their houses destroyed by the flood. And she said, I've been diagnosed with throat cancer this year and I'm finding it difficult to talk and I thought I wasn't going to until you showed how much you cared by sharing the story of other people facing a flood. That's why we share stories, because they matter so much and they give someone else permission to share their story.
What I'd like to say is that I like being here and I find it so uplifting. I don't mind getting...
We love you.
No. It's the positivity and actually seeing women in the Methodist Church and actually women being seen in the Methodist Church as individuals and important and respected individuals. And you know what? This has been happening for so many years in the Methodist Church. You don't get it in other churches. There is this hierarchy, and in a lot of very popular churches. But women are still, you know, there's the man and then there's the women. In the Methodist Church, as a whole, we are people together. And I find that so positive and uplifting. And I think it's how God intended.
Male
He
and
made
female.
us male and female.
Yes, he did. Right at the back. Thank you. Hi, Vic.
It's just a little thing. My brother is 6 years younger than me, and he's 18, just turned 18 last month. And my nickname for him, what I call him, is Pickle. Mum calls him Lamb, I call him Pickle. And I said to him, last year, I said to him, is it okay that I call you Pickle? And he said, I'll always be your baby brother. Oh. And that really lifted me up. I love that boy.
Yeah, oh, little Pickle.
I've been a Christian 23 years this June, in a Baptist church for 10 years, and I've been a Methodist for 3 years, and I am now technically a minister's wife, although he's retired but doing services every Sunday. That's another story. But I have a question. Who here has heard of the solidarity circles?
I've heard the two
Some
words
of you.
spoken separately.
I've only been a Methodist 3 years, but Alison, who's in the room, Alison, where are you?
She's behind you.
Yeah. It's,
No, she's not.
There she is. I met Alison very early on in my Methodist journey, and she, how can I describe it, as sucked me into Methodist women in Britain.
Thank you, Alison. We appreciate that.
Within weeks, I was on the communications task group, because apparently I'm quite a good communicator. And now I'm on the Solidarity Circle for Women, because I have lived experience as a woman.
Oh.
As does every single person in this room.
Apart from Matt.
Anyway, we're recruiting. We have 15
Probably.
people on that we can have on the circle. We only have 7 or 8 at the moment, I think. So we're recruiting. So every single person in this room is a candidate. So
can you stand up so everyone can see you? So for the tingles that person is feeling.
I'm the one who likes the dungarees, although I'm hiding at the moment because I'm a bit chilly. But we need new people on the Solidarity Circle for Women, and the person who just spoke about women's lived experience in the church and in the Methodist Church, and we need to change it. And we're having some fabulous discussions every 6 weeks or so in Zoom about women in the church and women in the Methodist Church, and how we change how women work in the church, perceived in the church. We talk about inclusive language. We're doing all sorts of things. So if you feel and you have something to say, because you're all women, you don't have to be a good communicator. You just have to have lived experience and feel that you want to make a change. Then talk to me. Talk to Maggie. Maggie was, yeah. Is that okay, Maggie? Yes. Thank you. Pedsy, where's Pedsy? There she is. She's another one on the Solidarity Circle. There are other circles which some of you in this room will have lived experience of. There's disability, there's LGBT+, there's care, and there's another new one coming, which I can't remember. Anyway.
Community.
That's the one. Thank you.
But
we need you on the Solidarity Circle for Women, and there are other ones as well. So I'm sorry. That's why I wanted to share, because I felt from that conversation that I needed to plug it.
Stories matter. Thank you very much. 2 more. So Jenny's passing a microphone. Someone else has got a microphone.
Yeah. Hello.
Hello.
Melody. So the word that lift me up is kind. And I've had mental health before. And at the time, I had a community nurse and a psychiatric come to my home. And there was a time I couldn't speak. I froze. And I didn't like people to speak for me. So I wanted to voice by myself, but the time I was froze, and they showed me another way to communicate, which is writing. And I wrote what I wanted to say on a piece of paper, and that actually opened the door for me, because I now write books as well. So, and I'm free from mental health. Thank you.
Thank you. And last one, please.
Well, this comes a bit out of context, because it's really to ask the lady who spoke last but one, about solidarity circles. Given that the number of hands that went up knowing about it looked like about half a dozen to
Can
me.
they come and find you straight afterwards?
I only knew from reading the Methodist Church newsletter this Thursday. Okay. Could you just say a little bit more about where they do fit in and how to apply? What sort of length of commitment?
Can we do that afterwards? Yeah?
Yeah,
okay.
I think people are asking, what is this?
Yeah, no, thank you very much. We'll make sure that there's time to explain solidarity circles, or you can lynch it afterwards. I am going to move on purely because there's a story video that I want to make sure we have time for, because it's someone else's voice. So please do share your stories. If you want to share it with me, I'd absolutely love to hear those. Last story section. In the beginning was the Word. The Word was first. The Word present to God, God present to the Word. The Word was God. in readiness for God from day one. Everything was created through him. Nothing, not one thing, came into being without him. What came into existence was life, and the life was light to live by. The life light blazed out of the darkness. The darkness couldn't put it out. Like the Jews telling the story of a God who spoke and hovered and walked in the evening air of Eden, in contrast to that Babylonian story of war and conflict, John is telling a story at the beginning of the gospel, and it is possibly when John is about 90 years old, so right towards the end of his ministry. So near the end of the first century, long after Matthew, Mark, and Luke have been written. And it's in a context fraught with unease. To do this, he has introduced a new word into the storytelling about God and his people, and it's the word logos. And it's not appeared anywhere in the Old Testament, and when it's used in the New Testament, it's because John used it in this opening creation story. Now, I'm not going to do a magic Jenny translation. Directly, logos can just mean word, but it also holds the weight of reason and rational knowledge. So at the time, the Gnostic philosophers had separated and demoted Yahweh, the Jewish God, to being less than Jesus at this point. And because Yahweh was seen to be spirit, that couldn't have had all that to do with the material creation, and certainly didn't have anything to do with the rational and scientific processes. And there was a malevolence then in the creation of the world. We've seen that right at the beginning, that ill-intended purpose of human beings to be slaves to the gods versus the Hebrew understanding of purpose. That with that allowed evil to be part of, an inherent part of creation. And with this opening story, John is setting in stone that's not true. John unifies Yahweh and Jesus as one and the same, God and reason, God and Jesus, God in the perfection of creation. And I am so glad that he bothered to do it. Because if I had to live in a world meant and intended for evil, it would be much harder to get out of bed in the morning. Living in a world meant and intended for good, where the bar is godlike, created by a loving creator, feels very different to living in one created by a malevolent force. Can you imagine a world that is intentionally evil? Wasps take on a much more sinister presence than they ever have done before. When we talk about the people we help, it's also always with the belief that they have the potential as human beings, and people have the potential of God, the image of God. Wesley talked about our ability to know deep down in our souls of what our meanness was, made in the image of God. It's what, when Jenny says we're going to do some Bible study and some Greek interpretation in the morning, it's what absolutely reassures me that I am here to know, to feel it deep into my bones, that I am loved and wondered over and glorified in, and the song of God is sung over me. I can know that because in the beginning was the Word that was reason and knowledge and understanding. It is wisdom, which is why I'm wearing, if you hadn't recognised, owls, to channel my wisdom. Our role in that wisdom is to sit on the back seat as passengers of the tandem bike of other people's stories, genuine partners bringing what's appropriate for us to bring in, to not be backseat drivers, which everyone knows is very annoying, but to bring the power of our legs, essentially our money, to bring some of our wisdom if we already know the road, and then to trust the knowledge and experience people bring. We really try not to talk about being the voice of the voiceless, because everyone has a voice, even those people that don't have the ability to use their mouth as body language. You only have to sit next to the bed of someone who is no longer able to speak to realise they're able to communicate. Patrick showed us the importance of that not one member of his group with the diverse disabilities was voiceless. We just needed different ways to communicate. My uncle always says, if you take a healthy dolphin and you put it there, what have you done to the dolphin? Disabled it. Yeah, you've killed it. But you've disabled it. It was otherwise healthy, but the environment disabled it. So the next story is Cynthia, and she's going to tell her own story. This is our video for this year, and it felt important that she spoke it herself with Jeremiah.
I was already giving up. Got children, you have to go, be telling people no food to eat. So the best thing I could do is to die. Because I got tired of my children. Everybody is looking up to me and they are not getting anything. My auntie told me, school was not for women. I said, I want to go to school. And she said that she don't have the hay because at the time my father was dead. And I saw hatred rising from all anger, which caused me to leave home and get into the street.
In the context of Liberia, majority of our people are illiterate. After the Civil War, a whole generation have missed out on education. Mothers around here are single mothers, you know, and upbringing of a child, just a single person, and then more you can't read and write, you're almost like in the dark.
I heard about this school through a little girl who called me auntie. But we came to say, no, but then let's start with the actual literacy so you can be able to write your name.
Literacy is the bedrock for our organization. I see adult literacy as the thread that holds everything together, help them to be able to find something to do, maybe a job. It builds self-confidence and self-esteem. For those who can read and write, some of them have very brilliant ideas, but they don't see themselves as people who are worthy of any contribution. They don't think that they have anything to offer. And then when people are making decisions, they don't count on them. So most of the benefit that they should have gotten, even from government or other sources, it doesn't reach them.
For a woman to get a literacy skill, it's important that me now can wear my knee. It's good to know what you want to be and what you want to do. So it's good for a woman to learn to read and write.
Most of what we're hearing from the learners, we're completing is that to read and write is good, but after that, what next? We are led by the community and the issues impacting them. In fact, they have more ideas better than us. They know exactly their issues. The community has so much. You just need somebody to help them to see clearly what they have and how best to value what they have and make use of it.
I graduated from year 2017. I got the machine. I started practicing on my own. And I started getting customers small. I started getting strength.
Kids who have vocational skills, they quickly become independent, generating some funding to help themselves. They are able to advocate for themselves and make their own decisions.
The tutoring job means a lot to me because I said now I'm able to feed myself, help my children with their schooling. You can see me now, I can sew my clothes. I have one glass kite, one white glass with a shower slipper. And I wore this to service for 3 years. People who saw it only felt it was a uniform, not knowing it was the only clothes that I have to wear. And today, I can change clothes any hour, anytime. I got free now. Yes, nobody can come to me. I'm giving up. You don't give what you don't have.
The significance of the partnership with All We Can. One of the good things is they said to us, we're not here to tell you do this or do that. We see them as a true partner. True partners will work with you in a way that when they are gone, you're much more better than they met you.
Chef have caused me today that I can sing. I was a baker But today I'm not a giver because I'm not only eating my one, I'm also stretching it. Yeah.
We invite you to join Shift today to help communities to tailor their journeys and fulfill their potential.
It's felt really important to make space to listen to the stories. It has felt that listening matters. Something healing happens in that space. So I'm going to cut the end of my thing. But just imagine if Cynthia's story had finished with, "I just want to die." And instead, it took someone walking up to her to hear her and help her retell her story. So now she's a giver and not a beggar. A woman who can change her clothes as often as she wants to. And my favourite moment with her, and this is where the soft stuff of development really matters, it was not All We Can, an international development organisation, that changed the path for her, nor was it Shift. Did anyone notice who helped her find a new story? It was a little girl who called her auntie, re-honoured her, and said, "You've got a different story to tell." That is our work. That is our story. As you go over lunch, I just want you to think of the question. I'm going to have to click through a few. There's Cynthia. That was Alif. That's my own personal story. Ignore that. That is Aglet. If you want an update on Aglet, I can give you that. But you're not getting that today now. That is a really helpful story, but you're not getting that either. Now you're interested. That was returning to Pamela. Hang on, let me tell you about Pamela. I want us to get to lunch so we're not queuing for ages and ages. But we will, if there is a moment to give a quick update on Aglet, but we need to go for lunch, then we will do. I'm skipping Pamela as well. This is how important your stories have been at the expense of me telling mine. Last one. So that is Buba, Shift, which is in Liberia, Buba in Uganda, and then Kofkawe in Uganda. You remember their stories? What words have set you free? Lunch. What words have set you free? So that is your lunchtime homework. Because otherwise we're going to be in a queue for a very long time. Thank you very much. Please come and talk to me and Vic if you have been motivated to work with All We Can. That does not mean that you need to not work with Action for Children or Fund for Human Need, because together we're working for a more beautiful world. Thank you very much.